WAMU 88.5 at American University in Washington. Welcome to the Kojo Nnamdi Show, connecting your neighborhood with the world. It's a special edition of the Politics Hour Mayoral Forum. D.C. voters have big decisions to make on September 14th. The primary elections taking place then will largely determine the arc of this fall's big races, including the race for mayor. Today we're joined by the two leading candidates for their job, Mayor Adrian Fenty and D.C. Council Chairman Vincent Gray, for a conversation about the challenges facing the city and their solutions to them. It's also your turn to ask the candidates questions about the issues that are important to you. The Kojo Nnamdi Show previously conducted interviews with three other Democratic candidates for mayor, Leo Alexander, Suleiman Brown, and Ernest Johnson. Video of these interviews is available at our website, kojoshow.org. Now allow me to welcome into the studio Adrian Fenty. He is the mayor of Washington, D.C. He's a native Washingtonian, a Democrat who's running for re-election. Mayor Fenty, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Kojo. I really appreciate it.
Also with us is Vincent Gray. He is a native Washingtonian, a Democratic candidate for mayor of Washington. He's currently the chairman of the D.C. Council. Chairman Gray, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kojo. Delighted to be here.
Also with us is Tom Sherwood. He's our resident analyst. He's an NBC4 reporter and a columnist for the current newspapers. He's a native of wherever he claims to be from at this time.
I'm not a native, but I've given my heart here.
He's been around so long that most of you probably think he was born here. He was here when you were born.
My son was, so I take credit for at least increasing the population.
Mm-hmm. Gentlemen, here's the reality. We've got 49 minutes, 4 people talking in studio, more planning to join the conversation by phone, email, tweet, our website, our Facebook page, or online. Do the math. So questions and answers have to be as concise as possible. If an answer, or for that matter, a question, Tom, goes over 90 seconds, you'll be hearing from me. And we have a timekeeper here to my right, Tara Boyle. To be clear, you won't have the time to respond to every attack against you, but you will be given time to respond to every question. And at the end, each candidate will be allowed a 1-minute closing statement. Gentlemen, the clearest poll reported on today by WMU 88.5's Patrick Madden indicates that Mayor Fenty has a big lead among white voters and Chairman Gray has a big lead among black voters. And there is a racial subtext to some of the issues in this race. You don't hear much about the plan anymore, that alleged conspiracy by whites to wrest control of the city and run blacks out. What you do hear is that some developments, dog parks, bike lanes, streetcars, are intended to benefit only one group, new residents, meaning affluent whites, and not the other group, meaning poor blacks. What is your response to that observation, Chairman Gray?
Well, I think it's regrettable that we have this kind of apparent racial divide in the District of Columbia, and there clearly is a perception that there are some people in this city who are getting more than others. One of the themes that I run on, and it's not just during this campaign, is one city. And I believe that I'm the person who can bring this city together. I've worked all across the city my entire life. I'm a product of the public schools of the District of Columbia. And I believe we need to bring all 600,000 residents in the District of Columbia together. We will never be what we can be as long as we have, part of the city feeling that it's left out, and another part, and perceiving the other part of the city as getting more. So this is something that I feel as I go across the city, and I think the polls have corroborated that.
Do you feel there's any validity to the notion that dog parks and bike lanes and streetcars only benefit one part of the population, affluent whites?
Well, let's take streetcars for an example. Streetcars are intended to begin on 8th Street Northeast, where we have a very substantial African American population. I've been a supporter of streetcars. So where they will be starting will be in an area where there are lots of African Americans who are living and do business. As a matter of fact, the first place that they were going to be put in, or at least the last place, there have been several places, would have been on Martin Luther King Avenue, which would have been in Ward 8. And there are many citizens over there who really weren't that enamored of streetcars, and they would move to another place after that. So when you look at the streetcar issue as illustrative of this, it's clear that that isn't necessarily well-founded.
Mayor Fenty, your response to the same observation that bike parks, streetcars, dog parks are essentially for affluent whites, not for poor blacks.
And I want to start out addressing the more general question of the disparity that you mentioned in the poll. We know we've got a lot of work to do over the next 27 days, making sure that people know my record and feel comfortable and are excited about it. The record tells a story of an administration that has done a tremendous amount on the east side of the city. It'll tell its story about 4 new recreation centers proposed or being built in Ward 8 alone, 2 others in Ward 7. It'll tell a story about an administration that saw no grocery stores at all in Ward 8 for the past 20 years, and we've already opened 1 in Camp Sims in Ward 8 and have another one scheduled to open this summer along Pennsylvania Avenue in Minnesota. It'll tell a story about an administration that has already opened libraries on Benning Road, on Good Hope Road. It'll tell a story about administration that's helped to open new steakhouses on Minnesota and Dix. It's going to open up new housing, affordable housing right on Minnesota and Benning with new retail on the bottom. And so to get to your point, because you were about to cut me off while I'm going through this long list of stuff that we've done,
right, yeah.
We have to be able to convince people and show people that these things both started and ended on my administration and would not have happened were we not in office. We know we've got a challenge to do so.
But do you think they benefit poor blacks as much as they benefit affluent whites, specifically dog parks, streetcars, and bike lanes?
Well, all of those recreation centers, libraries, and the schools I was going to talk about, the shoring up United Medical Center over on Southern Avenue, all of those things not only benefit African Americans, but are literally in African American wards in the city on the eastern side. Why do people still have some qualms with my campaign? I think it's my fault. I think I got to do a better job educating people about what we've done.
One more before Tom Sherwood takes over completely. There's also a racial subtext to the firing of school teachers. Teachers Union Vice President Nate Saunders essentially said as much on the Politics Hour. They're role models in the African American community, he said. The school's chancellor is not African American, which is part of what drives this racial sentiment. Do you think, Chairman Gray, that the mayor should be sensitive to the racial makeup of the teachers' corps, or have we in Washington arrived at a point when it should simply be all about performance, not the race of the school's chancellor or the race of the teachers?
Well, I think fundamentally it has to be about the achievement of our kids. And we've seen some improvements, and frankly, there are areas where there have not been improvements. All along the way, even before this race started, I have been a proponent of accountability, that people need to be accountable for their performance. I think there are some serious questions about the impact evaluation that is being used with teachers at this stage. Its validity has not been established, and its application, frankly, has been questioned in a number of circles as the basis then for firing teachers. It's the impact evaluation and test scores. And what we've frankly done, what this administration has done, is create an environment within which teachers are teaching to the test, and I don't think that's necessarily a measure of whether kids are learning or not.
Do you think race should be taken into account when we look at the firing of teachers or the hiring of teachers?
Well, I think if there is an allegation that race may be at the basis of the firing, it certainly should be looked at, but it certainly should not be a factor. Performance should be a factor in whether our kids are learning or not.
Do you think there should be a sensitivity to race as we look at performance of teachers, Mayor Fenty?
The chancellor has been charged, both by me as the person who nominated her and the council who approved her, for fixing the school system. And one of the things that the chancellor has done in a fantastic way is to start to evaluate teachers, which will allow her to be able to remove teachers who are underperforming and reward those who are, and I support her 100% in those efforts. Now, in the last 2 questions, I think you're starting to see the distinction between the 2 of the candidates who are here. The chairman professes the support for streetcars, but he was the sole person who led the cut in the streetcar funding before everyone got exercised and got the council to put it back. The criticism of the impact, which basically is how the chancellor reviews teachers' performance, that is not the place for either a city council chairman or for a mayor. if we hire somebody to do a job, and we've hired the chancellor to fix the schools, then she comes up with the evaluation system. She and her team of experts. We are the politicians. Politicians need to stay out of the day-to-day running of the schools. That is how we got ourselves in the problems that we're in for the last 30 years.
Do you also believe that race has no place in this discussion whatsoever?
Your question was whether race had any place in whether or not somebody should be hired or fired. The only thing that has a place in whether someone should be hired or fired is whether they are doing a good job for our kids.
Tom Sherwood.
I wanted to maybe finish this discussion about race by asking Mr. Gray. You spoke to the teachers' rally last fall, I think it was, after the initial round of firings. And you said, I think you just said a moment ago that, you've heard people contend that there is racism involved in Ms. Reed's decisions or in some of the decisions by the mayor's administration. I would ask you more definitely, do you see and do you believe that there has been some type of racism in the way Michelle Reed has gone about her job, or is it simply a disagreement on her tactics? Is racism involved from your perspective, not from what people tell you? Because I know they tell me that all the time. They tell you that. But do you think it's racism?
I have not seen any evidence of racism. There have been numerous allegations of racism all along the way. And frankly, when I spoke to the teachers' rally, one of the things we raised questions about was the way that this was done. First of all, there continue to be questions about whether there was a budget deficit that led to, to the teachers being fired. In fact, it was exacerbated when the teacher's contract came along, and the first thing that the chancellor told us was that she was going to be able to fund it because there was a budget surplus. And of course, we were incredulous at that stage because 3 months before that, she had fired teachers allegedly because there was a budget deficit. Secondly, on the budget question, we had actually done the budget in a particular way in the council. The chancellor chose to unilaterally disregard what the council had done, and the mayor, by the way, had signed, and fired twice as many teachers as the budget would have called for.
Can I go right to the budget, because that's the other big issue in this city?
Your call.
I've talked
Can I just comment on a couple of these?
Well, Kojo is the moderator.
Mm-hmm. You can comment briefly, to be sure.
On a couple of things. One, I would like to say that the chancellor, I think, deserves all of our support for the decisions she's made, and to ask a question whether she would make something, a decision based on anything except performance, when there has been no evidence to the alternative, I think is to denigrate a really hard-working public official that is making the types of tough decisions that we've been waiting for decades. On the teachers' cuts, listen, the one thing that hasn't got out in the news enough is that when the teachers were laid off in 2009, the city council cut the school's budget by $20 million, okay? If the city council had not cut the school system's budget by $20 million, all of those teachers who were quote-unquote riffed would still have their job today. So it's one of those things that the city council does. They both cause the rift, and then they complain when the chancellor had to do it. She told the council, we have scrubbed the budget, so if you make any additional cuts, we're absolutely going to have to do layoffs, and they did it anyway.
Well, gentlemen, allow me to raise.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, but please respond to it in this context. I'll ask a question, and you can then.
I want to respond, and to
you'll have your 90
said.
seconds to respond.
He is well aware.
I began by saying that there is a poll that shows a clear racial disparity in your support. What do you think accounts for the racial disparity?
Well, I was going to the issue of budget,
and then
Mr. Sherwood raised the question of budget. The reality is, and the mayor knows this, that the chancellor changed the council's action. She decided, the council said, look, let's reduce the size of summer school. That doesn't happen for 10 months, and we'll work hard to try to put the money back. The chancellor admitted in a hearing before the council of the district, I didn't like that because I didn't want to do that, so I fired more teachers instead of reducing the size of summer school. The mayor knows that, and he ought to own up to it because his chancellor admitted it on the record.
If you hadn't cut the $20 million, we would have had the teachers and the summer school. Why did it have to be both? Why did it have to be either or? That's the question.
Because, Mr. Mayor, there was, as you well know, a $150 million reduction in the budget that came from the CFO and revenues coming into the city. This council worked responsibly to balance this budget. We got no proposals from you that would balance the budget. The council worked hard. We raised revenue, and we made responsible cuts in the budget. You and your chancellor chose to cut all of those teachers.
Gentlemen, I actually cover the budget, and I'm having trouble following the conversation.